It's Lifestyle Friday on Africa Business Radio's Breakfast Connect. I am Bimbola. This week, we've been talking to people in the power sector, and today we'll continue the conversation by talking to someone who is doing something interesting in the electric power space. One common theme during the course of our conversation so far is the need to have more off-grid power companies to reduce the dependency and pressure on the national grid, at least until Nigeria finally decides to adopt a policy that will ensure independency on the grid is deliberate. Dr. Wiebe Boer joins us today on the program. He is the Chief Executive of AllOn, a renewable energy provider. Good morning, Dr. Boer.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm okay. Thanks for joining us. Let's begin with your company, AllOn. What's it all about?
Yeah, sure. So AllOn is funded by Shell, and it's an off-grid energy impact investment company. So primarily what we do is we invest in Nigerian companies that are delivering energy access solutions to low-income communities and small businesses. And so, the typical Nigerian consumer, whether household or business, gets some grid supply if they're lucky, but most of them have to rely on all sorts of alternative forms of power. And so what we're trying to do is invest in the companies that are delivering solutions that are affordable, that are clean. So, from solar, from other renewable sources and so on, and that are very reliable and affordable.
Now, from your experience running a renewable energy company in Nigeria, what do you think has been one of the key reasons Nigeria has been unable to meet its electric power needs?
Yeah, I was born in Nigeria, so I grew up as, seeing the power sector get worse and worse and so on. And I think in Nigeria, we almost have come to accept it, that that's just how it is. But I just want to start with saying it doesn't have to be this way. So where I grew up in Jos, on the outskirts of Jos is a company called NESCO, Nigeria Electric Supply Corporation. It's been operating as an independent power utility. It generates, transmits, and distributes its own power. It's the only company with a license like that. And it's been providing 24/7 power to communities in 7 local governments in Plateau State since 1929. So for 90 years, over 90 years, we have a company that has been proving year after year after year that with the right conditions, Nigeria can provide power and it can do it properly. So that's, I think, one thing that we always have to look at the positives, that it's not impossible and Nigerians deserve a working and reliable power sector. The bigger question, why doesn't the rest of the power sector work? Well, it's, I don't think we have 48 hours to do this interview, but I would say it's largely, look, there's been 20, 30, 40 years of underinvestment in the power sector. And at some point that just catches up with you. And in the meantime, we have used alternative sources, primarily diesel and petrol generators, to fill in the gaps. And because we're able to solve the problem and fill the gaps, we just continue to manage rather than saying, let's fix this comprehensively and get it done.
Now, what has been your assessment of the privatization process of the power sector so far?
Right. Well, the power sector was partly privatized in 2013. I mean, it's almost 7 years now. But the problem is that, the GenCos were partly privatized. I mean, most of them have still some government ownership. The distribution companies were privatized, again, most with some government ownership. But the transmission company was left in government hands and remains in government hands. So it would have been, during the telecoms period, if the government had given out licenses to the mobile companies, but said to them, oh, no, but you have to use NITEL infrastructure to deliver. And I mean, I think we know what would have happened. It would have been dead on arrival. So the unfortunate part of the power privatization, it was incomplete. And it didn't really allow for the market to freely operate so that, companies could charge what they needed to charge and customers could pay what they're willing to pay. And then there was open competition. One of the reasons that the telecoms revolution worked is that there were 2-3 companies competing, and, you could easily switch from one to the other, take your business elsewhere or use all of them. And we just haven't had that same opportunity in the power sector. And it really needs to have a fully open market where customers can choose and have options, and then the companies are able to charge what it actually costs to deliver power.
So Nigeria has so far spent an estimated $2 billion in its attempt to make the power sector work, and recently the World Bank just approved another $750 million to intervene in the development of the sector. How far do you think this latest results-based intervention fund will go?
Well, look, I mean, everything helps, right? But if you look at the power gap we have, a country with our population should have about 200,000 megawatts on the grid. We only have about 4,000. So the cost to fix that is actually around $200 billion, right? So 750 million is literally a drop in the ocean. At the same time, it is something that can help the system. But look, it's actually, what's interesting is it's actually the second of the World Bank loans in the last year. There was a $300 million World Bank loan last year, along with 200 million from the African Development Bank, so 500 million in all, that is being used through the Rural Electrification Agency for off-grid electrification of Nigeria. It's going to power all 37 federal universities, take them off the grid. It's providing subsidies for solar home system and mini grid companies so that their business models become more economically viable. And actually through this program, very quickly, thousands and thousands and up to, hundreds of thousands and eventually millions of Nigerian households are going to be powered with solar in a very quick way. So even if we completely work on starting to reform and fix a lot of the on-grid power right now, it takes years for it to actually have an impact. Right. And so I would say that, yes, the $750 million loan is important, but where Nigerians are going to actually feel the impact faster is the loan from last year that went to the program called the Nigeria Electrification Program that's being run through the Rural Electrification Agency.
Now, some have argued that one of the reasons foreign investment, or enough foreign investment, isn't coming into the power sector space is due to the uncompetitive nature of the current tariff regime. What's your response to that?
Right. Yeah, no, I mean, look, you understand that this is a difficult time for everyone. Many people have lost their jobs, have lost their livelihoods. Yeah. The economy is very uncertain. So, you can understand in that perspective that this is not the time to raise prices on anything. And so that part of it you understand, and you have to be empathetic to what people are really feeling and suffering every day. But on the flip side, it's also a very populist approach, right? And it's not thinking about, okay, look, so if we continue to keep the tariffs at a cost that is actually less than what it costs to deliver the power, it essentially means that we are maintaining this myth that power, on-grid power in Nigeria, is a social service, and therefore it shouldn't be paid for at all, or shouldn't be paid for at the value that at the actual cost it is to deliver it. So let's say when MTN, when EcoNet, all of these were licensed, if the government said, no, we're going to tell you how much you can charge exactly, and it's going to stay at that, even when the naira devalues, even though all your costs are in dollars, even though you raised money and loans in dollars, we're still going to keep the tariff at a certain rate, even though we know and that it actually costs you more to deliver the telecom service than what people are paying. Of course, those companies would have failed. They would have not invested the billions of dollars they did into the Nigerian economy. They wouldn't have put all the infrastructure they did. And what we're doing by not taking this difficult move, and again, let me be clear, right now, there's many other reasons to not change the tariff, but remove that. At some point down the road, we do need to take the difficult decision. And even though it's not popular, it does have to be that the market is opened and that distribution companies are able to charge what they need to charge so that they can actually become economically viable businesses. They can then invest in metering, they can invest to grow and deliver better service. So it's a bit of a chicken and egg, but without the increase in tariff, we're going to be in where we are now for the foreseeable future. Nothing will change. So here's the interesting thing that we see in Nigeria in the power sector. Okay, a typical Nigerian consumer doesn't want to pay their 20, 30 naira kilowatt hour for grid power from a disco. Okay, but they happily pay multiples of that to fuel their diesel or petrol generators and power it, right? And so, but the reason for that is because when I am spending money to power myself through diesel generation or petrol generator, I control when I have power. If I need power from 6 p.m. to 10 p.m., I can decide that, and I know what I'm paying for. The problem with the grid power is I'm paying for a service that I never know when it's available, whether I'll have it when I need it, and then I need the backup anyway, right? So again, like I said, it's a bit of a chicken and egg. Service has to improve so that people are more confident that what they're paying for is worth paying for. But at the same time, there is an interesting dilemma here where people do not want to pay for grid power. They feel like it's a social service, but they will pay much higher costs for alternative power sources, including solar. And so that's something that we really do need to explore and understand why that is and how we can break that.
Now let's go back to what you said about Nigerians paying more to fuel their power generating sets. In fact, some reports say the quantum of power from household and industrial power generators is about 6,000 megawatts. This suggests that someone or someones besides the NESCOs is or are getting paid, and if they had their way, they would want to maintain the status quo. Am I making sense, Dr. Boer?
Look, I mean, it's actually multiples of that. I mean, there's data from several years ago that showed that just in Lagos, there was something like 18,000 megawatts generated through private generators, whether diesel, gas, petrol. Right, and that's from households, businesses, industrials, etc. So it's likely that the amount for all of Nigeria is probably more like 50,000 megawatts that are generated by millions of generators, basically. So it's huge. It's a huge market. There's something like the total spend per year in Nigeria on power is about $20 billion, and 18 billion of that is on non-grid power. So, and I think of that 15 billion is diesel and petrol generators. So there's a huge amount of money in this space. So now, okay, so Nigerians have already kind of have used that as their way to manage and make it through when they don't get grid power, use primarily, relatively expensive, environmentally unfriendly diesel and petrol generators, etc. Now, when people say that there's a cartel of generator importers, I don't see that. I think there's 4 large sort of major generator companies. These are actually, they're at least from what I've seen, they're very harsh competitors against each other, and all that. And that's actually not where the quote unquote cartel is. Where the cartel is look, if you are delivering diesel several times a week to, let's say, a bank branch, to a government building, there's a lot that you can do to make that diesel. So if, it's supposed to be 1,000 liters that were delivered, you can sign off on that, but then actually only 500 was delivered. And then there's a lot of money that can be shared around, right? And there's no trace. It's all very clean. And so I think the issue here is not about buying and selling generators. It's the market for how diesel and so on is delivered to power those generators, and how easy that is as an opportunity on many levels to share money, let me say. So, and I think as long as that is entrenched, there's not going to be any serious effort to really reform the power sector, because why would you want to shut that all off?
Thank you so much for talking to us today on Breakfast Connect. We do hope to have you on a later date when we have another discussion relating to the power sector, which, knowing Nigeria, could be much sooner than later. Thank you.
No problem. Thanks for having me on, and I appreciate the good work you guys are doing.